The schoolhouse door hung crooked on its hinges, letting in more wind than warmth. Clara Morrison pressed her shawl tighter around her shoulders as she watched the last of her students disappear into the November dusk, their laughter swallowed by the endless Wyoming plains. 3 months behind on rent. No firewood left. And now Mrs. Henderson had made it clear. The town didn't need a teacher who couldn't even keep herself fed. Clara's hands trembled as she gathered the few books scattered across the makeshift desk. 24 years old, and this was all she had left of the dream that had brought her west from Boston. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Teaching is a noble profession, Clara. You'll make a difference." But noble didn't fill an empty stomach or patch the holes in her worn-out boots. The sound of hoofbeats made her freeze. Through the cracked window, she watched a lone rider approach, broad shoulders silhouetted against the dying light, his horse's breath forming clouds in the cold air. She'd seen him before, always from a distance. Zeke Hawthorne, the richest rancher in 3 counties, whose sprawling homestead stretched beyond the horizon. What could he possibly want with her? He dismounted with the fluid grace of a man born to the saddle, his spurs jingling softly as he approached the schoolhouse. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. She smoothed her faded dress and opened the door before he could knock. Up close, Zeke Hawthorne was even more imposing than the stories suggested. Weathered hands, steel-gray eyes that seemed to see straight through her pretenses, and a jaw set with the kind of determination that had carved an empire from wilderness. But there was something else, a weariness that matched her own, hidden beneath the expensive leather and silver. "Miss Morrison," his voice was rough velvet, shaped by wind and solitude. "I need to speak with you." Clara nodded, stepping aside to let him enter the small schoolhouse. The space felt even smaller with his presence filling it. He removed his hat, revealing dark hair shot through with premature silver, and turned those penetrating eyes on her. "I'll be direct," he said, his words hanging in the cold air between them. "I have a proposition that might benefit us both." Zeke's gaze swept over the sparse schoolhouse, the patched walls, the meager stack of books, the cold stove that told its own story of hardship. When his eyes returned to Clara, she saw something unexpected, recognition, not pity, but the understanding of someone who knew what it meant to fight for survival. "My boys need a mother," he said simply, "and you need a home." Clara's breath caught. She'd heard whispers about the Hawthorne boys, 2 young sons left motherless when fever claimed Zeke's wife 3 years ago. Wild as tumbleweeds, folks said. No woman in town had managed to tame them for more than a few weeks. "I'm talking about marriage," Zeke continued, his voice steady but his knuckles white where they gripped his hat. "A partnership. You'd have a roof over your head, food on your plate, and the boys would have someone to teach them more than just how to rope cattle. In return," he paused, vulnerability flickering across his features. "In return, I'd have someone who understands that children need more than discipline and duty." The wind rattled the schoolhouse windows, punctuating the silence. Clara's mind raced. Marriage to a stranger, even one whose reputation spoke of fairness and honor. But what choice did she have? The alternative was returning east in defeat, tail between her legs, admitting her father had been wrong about her strength. "The boys," she said carefully. "How old are they?" 8 and 10, Samuel and Daniel. His expression softened. "They're good kids, just lost, like their father, I suppose." Clara studied his face, searching for signs of cruelty or deception. Instead, she found the same bone-deep exhaustion she recognized in her own mirror. 2 people drowning in different oceans, reaching for the same piece of driftwood. "I wouldn't expect—" Zeke cleared his throat, color rising in his weathered cheeks. "That is, the arrangement would be practical. Separate rooms, no obligations beyond caring for the boys and managing the household." It was a business proposition dressed up in wedding clothes, but Clara had learned that survival often required compromising dreams for reality, and there was something in his eyes, a carefully banked gentleness that suggested this man might be worth the risk. "The townspeople will talk," she said. "Let them." His jaw tightened. "My ranch is far enough from their wagging tongues." Outside, the first snow began to fall, dusting the window with promise and threat. Clara knew that whatever she decided in the next few moments would change the course of her life forever. Before Clara could answer, the thunder of approaching hoofbeats shattered the moment. Multiple riders this time, moving fast and hard across the frozen ground. Zeke's body went rigid, his hand instinctively moving to the gun at his hip as he peered through the window. "Trouble," he muttered, then looked at Clara with new urgency. "Whatever you decide about my offer, decide it quick. That's Sheriff Bradley and his posse, and they don't ride this hard unless someone's blood is in the water." The riders pulled up in a cloud of dust and steam, their horses lathered despite the cold. Sheriff Bradley dismounted with the heavy grace of a man carrying bad news. Behind him, 3 deputies flanked the group, their faces grim beneath their hat brims. "Hawthorne!" Bradley's voice cut through the evening air. "Need to talk to you, now!" Zeke stepped outside, Clara close behind. The sheriff's eyes flicked between them, noting the intimate proximity, the way Clara's hand had unconsciously moved to Zeke's arm. News would be all over town by morning. "What's this about, Sheriff?" "Johnny Martinez escaped from the territorial prison 3 days ago." Bradley spat into the dirt. "Word is he's heading this way, looking to settle accounts. Seems he blames you for his brother's death during that cattle-rustling business last spring." Clara felt Zeke's muscles tense beneath her fingers. She had heard about the Martinez gang, vicious men who'd terrorized the territory until Zeke had helped track them down. The trial had been swift, but not swift enough to prevent threats of revenge. "My boys," Zeke said, his voice tight. "Already sent a man to watch your ranch," Bradley assured him, "but Martinez is smart, and he's got help. Could hit anywhere, anytime. Might go after anyone connected to you." His gaze shifted meaningfully to Clara. The implication hung heavy in the cold air. Simply by being here, by considering Zeke's proposal, Clara had already painted a target on her back. The practical marriage arrangement had suddenly become a matter of life and death. "How many men does he have?" Zeke asked. "At least 4, maybe more. They hit a supply train yesterday, killed 2 guards." Bradley's expression darkened. "This ain't just about revenge anymore, Hawthorne. Martinez has gone mad dog. Won't stop until you're dead, or he is." Snow continued to fall, harder now, turning the world white and silent. Clara realized she was still holding on to Zeke's arm, still standing close enough to feel his warmth. In the span of minutes, her choice had transformed from a question of survival to one of courage. After the sheriff and his men rode off into the swirling snow, Zeke and Clara stood in the growing darkness outside the schoolhouse. The weight of shared danger had shifted something between them, the careful distance of strangers replaced by the instinctive closeness of allies. "You should go back east," Zeke said quietly, though his voice carried no conviction. "Tonight. I'll give you money for the train." Clara surprised herself by laughing, a sound that held more steel than humor. "And leave you to face this alone? What kind of teacher would I be if I ran at the first sign of trouble?" He turned to study her face in the lamplight spilling from the schoolhouse window. "You barely know me." "I know enough." She stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his gray eyes. "I know you came here with an honest proposal, instead of trying to take advantage of my desperation. I know you think of your boys before yourself, and I know you're scared, not of Martinez, but of failing the people you care about." Something cracked in Zeke's carefully controlled expression. "My wife," he began, then stopped, swallowing hard. "Sarah. She died because I wasn't there when she needed me. Took too many chances, trusted that nothing could touch what was mine. I won't make that mistake again." Clara reached up and touched his cheek, feeling the rough stubble and the tremor that ran through him at her contact. "Some mistakes can't be avoided, only learned from. Your boys need a father who's brave enough to live, not one who's too afraid to love again." "And what do you need, Clara Morrison?" The question hung between them, honest and raw. Clara thought of her father's dreams, her own abandoned hopes, the long, lonely years stretching ahead if she chose safety over risk. "I need to matter," she whispered. "I need to be part of something bigger than my own fear." Zeke's hand covered hers where it rested against his face. "If you say yes to the marriage, to my boys, to this life, I can't promise it'll be easy, but I can promise you'll matter, more than you know." The snow fell heavier now, beginning to accumulate on their shoulders and in their hair. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, answered by another, the sound of the wild calling to its own. "Yes," Clara said, the word barely audible above the wind. "Yes to all of it." Zeke's smile transformed his entire face, years of loneliness lifting like morning fog. He pulled her closer, not quite an embrace, but something warmer than partnership. Something that might grow into love, given time and trust. The wedding took place 3 days later in the small church at the edge of town, with Sheriff Bradley's men standing guard outside and Zeke's ranch hands filling the pews. Samuel and Daniel Hawthorne, ages 8 and 10, stood beside their father in their best clothes, watching their new stepmother with the solemn curiosity of children who'd learned early that adults could disappear without warning. Clara wore her mother's dress, altered to fit and clean to shine, despite its age. As she spoke her vows, her voice clear and strong in the hushed church, she saw something shift in the boy's eyes. Hope, tentative but real. Martinez never came. 2 weeks after the wedding, word arrived that the outlaw had been shot attempting to rob a bank in Colorado, his gang scattered to the wind. The threat that had pushed Clara and Zeke together dissolved like snow in spring sunshine, leaving them to discover what remained when danger no longer bound them. What remained was surprisingly solid. Zeke proved to be a man of quiet humor and unexpected gentleness, patient with his boy's adjustment to having a woman in the house, generous with his time when Clara struggled to understand ranch life. Clara brought laughter back to the Hawthorne household, turning the evening meal into storytelling time and transforming the ranch's dusty office into a proper schoolroom where the boys could learn alongside the children of neighboring homesteads. The separate bedrooms arrangement lasted exactly 6 months. By the time summer painted the Wyoming plains gold and green, Clara had moved her few possessions into the master bedroom, where Zeke's quiet "good morning, wife" greeted her each dawn with increasing warmth. Years later, when their own children played in the yard alongside Samuel and Daniel, Clara would remember that snowy November evening when desperation had worn the mask of opportunity. She'd learned that sometimes the greatest courage lay not in grand gestures, but in the simple act of saying yes to an uncertain future with someone worth trusting. The schoolhouse still stood at the edge of town, but it housed a new teacher now. Clara's classroom had become something larger, a ranch where children learned that family could be chosen as well as born, where love could grow from the careful tending of everyday kindness, and where the vast Wyoming sky held enough room for all their dreams. In the fading light of each evening, as she stood on the porch, watching Zeke and the boys work with the horses, Clara knew she'd found what she'd been searching for all along, not just survival, but a place where she could plant roots deep enough to weather any storm.